panel that you would like to be the front of the bag right side up. Take your pattern piece and cut out the pocket section like a window. If you adjusted the size of your gusset or your pocket, you may need to adjust the size of your window accordingly. So you may need to bring it in or bring it out depending on how your pocket fit. Align your pattern piece with your fabric and trace the window. Mark the centers. Take your pocket and align the top center of the pocket with your top center mark. Remember, you can find the centers by folding in half. Pin all the way around. Align the edge of your pocket with your guide mark. When I'm pinning the pocket, I like to pin the top center, the bottom center, and then pin down. And if needed, I'll let these bottom corners curve naturally rather than trying super hard to make them fit the exact shape on the pattern. As long as they look nice when you pin, it's just fine. Once your pocket's been pinned, you're going to stitch the pocket to the front piece using a really small seam allowance, about 1/16 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch. I am going to keep my stitch length at 3.5 since I'm going through so many layers of fabric. It's quite thick, but I do want to make sure it's strong, so I'm going to try to go through all the layers if I can and not just the cotton. When sewing this section, if you'd like to, you can sew over it twice for added strength or use a triple stitch if you prefer. Our pocket's all attached. So once I've got it sewn on, I like to open up the pocket and just shape it a bit. Give it a good finger press. And make sure everything looks nice. Once our front panel is done, it's time to start preparing the back panel. For the back panel, you need your strapping. Cut 2 pieces of strapping that are approximately 32 inches long for the straps. Cut 1 piece that's approximately 7 inches long for the handle, and 2 pieces that are about 1 3/4 or 2 inches for the bottom connectors. The first thing we're going to do is prepare the handle. Grab your 7-inch piece of strapping and mark 2 inches from each end. Careful of the pins and fold the strapping in half. In the center section, between the pins, stitch the strapping together with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Your strapping now should be open only at the ends, and it should be closed in the middle. Grab your 2 rectangle rings and your 2 short pieces of strapping. Slide one of the pieces of strapping into the rectangle ring and fold in half. And do the same on the other. And stitch in place with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You need your long strapping, the rectangle ring, and your tri-glide. take your strapping and slide it through the right side of your rectangle ring. So it should have the ridges on the front. Give yourself a good amount of space and take your tri-glide. This is the right side. I can feel the rough ridges here. I'm going to place the end of my strapping through the bottom opening, and I'm going from the wrong side to the right side. Then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to go up through the top ring. And back. I want this piece of strapping to overlap about an inch. I want to give myself enough space so that I can sew this in place. Stitch in place with about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure this is really strong. I like to go over it several times. Using a zigzag is also nice. I now have my tri-glide attached. You can see that my rectangle ring, the tab is pointing down, and I've got the right side of my rectangle ring here. I'm going to take the other end of my strapping and fold it up. And I'm going to take this end and I'm going to place it up through the top loop of the tri-glide and then down through the other loop. Pull it flat. And you now have an adjustable strap. Repeat this process for the other strap. Let's attach the straps. Let's start at the top section. I have a pin marking the top center. I'm going to measure 3/4 of an inch from that center point on either side. This will create a gap that is 1.5 inches apart. I'm going to take the strap I just put together and the top free end, the one without the rectangle ring, I'm going to lie just to the side of my mark. I'm going to pin it in place. I'm going to grab my second strap and do the same thing on the other side. Once I have these two pinned in place, I'm going to take my top handle piece. You want it to be facing right side up so the seam will be touching the fabric. Place one end exactly over top of your other piece of strapping, aligning the raw edges. Curve the strapping and lay it over top of the second strap. Now let's look at the bottom. I have a pin marking the bottom center. I'm going to use my ruler and I'm going to mark 2¼ inches on each side. This will create a section that is 4.5 inches wide. Now take the bottom ends of the straps. These are the ends that contain the rectangle rings. Lay it just to the side of your mark and pin in place. Make sure that your straps aren't twisted and that they're facing right side up. Do the same on the other side. My straps are now pinned in place. I'm going to stitch these in place on the top and the bottom with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that all of our backpack pieces are assembled, it's time to put them together. We're going to start with the front panel, so this is the one with the pocket attached. Make sure you've marked the top and bottom center. You're also going to want your gusset. Make sure you've marked the top and bottom center here as well. We're going to use the same process that we used for the pocket. Make sure when you look at your gusset that you put it in the correct direction. The smaller side, the one with the curve, is the one that should be touching the front panel. So line up your centers, pin top and bottom center, and then pin around the sides, adjusting if needed. Don't forget to do your little clips on the gusset if you need to. Once your whole gusset's been pinned in place, go ahead and stitch with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure that the front panel is on the bottom and the gusset on the top so that you can prevent any pleats. Check to make sure everything looks good. And then bind the seam or finish the seam as you did before. This time I'm going to bind as I go. So I'm still going to fold under one edge, and I'm going to make sure that the short side is facing me. And when I start stitching, I'm going to start about an inch down from the end so that I can tuck under the other end when I finish. Now connect the back panel. Make sure you've marked top and bottom centers, and make sure that the straps stay out of the way when you're sewing. If you need to, you can pin or clip these together in the center so you don't have to worry about them. Turn right sides together. Align the centers. Stitch as before. Make sure your zippers open a bit. Press Be careful of your strapping. Open up your zipper and turn your bag right side out. I'm going to use my pressing hand to press my seams. Be really careful of the strapping, you don't want to melt it. We are almost done. The last step is optional. If you like, you can add a little metal tag to your backpack. I love these little handmade tags. I think they give it a really nice look. You just have to hand sew it. I like to sew it either to the front of the pocket or at the top of the bag. Wherever you place it, you do want to make sure it's centered.